Good afternoon, and welcome to the executive briefing for the Cozy Croissant. Moving into our agenda, we are going to start with some introductions, then move into our executive and reassessment summary, then move into compliance and recommendations, and then wrap it up with a conclusion. Starting off, my name is Justin Covert. I'm the manager of Team 12. Alongside me are senior consultants, Gabriel Falk and Dylan Tran. Alongside me are also consultants, Jasmine Weddle, Taylor Nguyen, and Eric Tran. Overall, Team 12 identified 39 total vulnerabilities within the Cozy Croissant system, 25 of which were unique and not present during the initial assessment in November. Overall, 100% of discovered endpoints were compromised within the Cozy Croissant's environment. Additionally, Team 12 assessed that TCC is open to $6.56 million in potential fines annually. This comes from 100 different regulation violations that led to over 1,000 customers potentially having their data exposed.
Continuing on with the executive summary, here are the objectives that Team 12 was tasked to perform. First of all, Team 12 had assessed the general security posture of the Cozy Croissant's internal infrastructure, also validated the integrity of TCC's business processes and customer-facing systems, as well as performed a social engineering phone call examination against TCC's staff, and last but not least, verified compliance with various regulations and frameworks, including the PCI and GDPR. Team 12 was able to evaluate the criticality of findings based off of a likelihood and impact matrix. Likelihood meaning how likely or how easy it is for an attacker to exploit a vulnerability, and impact meaning how much damage can be done to your organization.
All right, let's jump into the details of the reassessment, shall we? So, as we stated earlier, Team 12 found 39 different vulnerabilities in TCC's network. This chart here is a distribution of those vulnerabilities by their rated criticality. I want to make 2 points here. The first one is that there were a majority of these findings discovered after TCC dropped their network segmentation firewall rules. And secondly, that a sizable portion of these vulnerabilities, as you can see, existed in the initial assessment in November, and they continue to persist to the reassessment as well. Taking a specific look at the residual risk that TCC is facing, these are the vulnerabilities that were initially discovered in the November assessment. And we can see here that the majority of the initial findings were not remediated, and this puts TCC at risk of potential compromise because of their poor password policy, which they did not remediate. This puts TCC at risk of compromise because they are potentially liable for a large number of fines due to compliance violations, as well as vulnerable to having their revenue generation operations prevented by advanced persistent threats.
Moving into compliance, Team 12 assessed TCC based on 3 frameworks. GDPR, due to the guests that travel from across Europe to stay at TCC for information acquired from our previous engagement. Second, PCI DSS, to ensure that customer credit card information is safe and secure for the Cozy Croissant. And finally, the Nevada data breach disclosure law, to ensure that A, customer data is as protected as possible, and second, to protect and bolster TCC's reputation. Team 12 discovered a total of 45 GDPR violations with an approximate estimated fines of $6.44 million. This estimate was generated based on historical GDPR fine data from similar sized hotels across Europe that face similar compliance violations. Team 12 also discovered 53 PCI violations with estimated fines between $5 and $10 million per month, or on the high end, $120,000 per year. Next slide, please. And finally, Team 12 also discovered 2 Nevada privacy law violations, which would, if compromised by a malicious actor, necessitate immediate disclosure to all affected customers, which would negatively impact TCC's reputation. Overall, all 100 compliance violations were direct results of insecure processing of PII or insecure storage of it.
Before we move into our recommendations, we'd like to acknowledge the key strengths that we observed from the TCC network during our assessment. The first and most significant one being the network segmentation. This was the #1 recommendation that we had from the previous assessment, and the implementation was extremely effective. Second is the containerization of the Linux services, which added a layer of security for the underlying systems that were hosting the services. And last, we have the extensive logging and monitoring. Everything that we did during the assessment was detected by the TCC security team and confirmed with us, which was extremely valuable. Next slide, please. Now, for our areas of improvement and our recommendations, this is not an exhaustive list, but this is what TCC should be prioritizing based on this assessment. First up is Active Directory. Active Directory was vulnerable, and our first recommendation is to ensure that all the systems are up to date. And this is because we were able to utilize well-known public exploits to compromise the entirety of the domain. Second is to implement the principle of least privilege. The users in Active Directory were extremely overprivileged. For example, all users on the domain, including the guest account, were able to have administrative access to the corporate workstations. And last, we have the configurations. The configurations that we observed that were implemented in Active Directory were against the industry standard. To remediate this, we recommend looking further into resources such as official Microsoft documentation to configure Active Directory. Next slide, please.
The second area of improvement, social engineering. Team 12 has conducted a voice phishing assessment in which we were able to obtain 23 pieces of unique customer information, including a list of names and a billing address, all within a 10-minute voice call. Now, to help prevent this from happening again in the future, TCC should implement some sort of social engineering awareness training, which includes procedures for how employees should deal with potential phishing attempts. TCC should also mandate that the person on the phone should verify the identity of the caller before disclosing any information. Last but not least, password policy. TCC has a relatively weak password policy, which suffered from weak, empty, and reused passwords across the entire network. Now, to help mitigate this issue in the future, TCC should ensure that all passwords of the administrator accounts should be rotated regularly, as well as passwords be stored securely. They should be complex, and that they should be unique. Lastly, TCC should also implement multi-factor authentication.
In conclusion, when the network segmentation was lifted, we identified that TCC was less secure as well as less compliant from the initial assessment. Moving forward as executives, we believe that it would be best to remediate the social engineering finding as well as the password reuse finding, as it granted access to the entire environment. Thank you, and are there any questions?
Thank you very much. Very clear. So do you think if we were to move to the cloud, we would address the issues you found?
So I would say moving to the cloud can remediate. Moving to the cloud can remediate some of the issues. However, there are a lot of implementations that are configured within the cloud, and those implementations can also be insecure. So it would also, the Cozy Croissant would need to ensure that the cloud systems, if moved to the cloud, are also secure as well.
Okay. Additionally, when migrating to something like the cloud, you are either going to have to hire new people that are cloud experts or train your current security staff to be able to respond to cloud incidents, which may incur extra costs that switching to cloud might just offset.